When did you first feel like an adult? Story 1. When I bought the house I live in. I moved out from home and bought a fudge house. It was overwhelming. I stood there with the keys in my hand and thought to myself, okay, so that is it. It took me months to figure out how to do everything around the house. Answer. Just moved out and bought my first house a week ago. After I got over the initial awe of being an adult, I was quickly worn out by DIY projects, replacing sinks, pipes, adjusting cabinets, installing and wiring a microwave, light switches, doorknobs, HVAC repair, etc. I still have so much to do, and now I have 2 cats that take an interest in anything I do, making it 5 times harder. Story 2. I'm 24, with a respectable job and an income higher than my parents. I still don't feel like an adult. Usually at meetings, I'm thinking about video games or what it would be like to have superpowers. When I get home, I watch cartoons. I still get shoot tipsy on the weekends. I spend far too much money on toys and games. I also still look like I'm 18. Frankly, I never want to feel like I'm an adult. It sounds boring. Story 3. The first time I felt like I was a real grown-up was when I was working at vacation care on an excursion with a bunch of kids aged 5 to 12. A 6 or 7-year-old notified me that the leather covering on the wall of the bus was ripped. My response was, yeah, don't pick at it. I was shocked as soon as the words passed my lips. Story 4. I'm 19 now and living on my own for the most part. When I was a kid, my mom would always make this awesome green bean casserole, but only on special occasions like Christmas, Thanksgiving, and Easter. The other day I was sitting at home wanting some. Then it dawned on me. I can just go to the store and buy the stuff and then just make some. It was a strange yet satisfying casserole. Story 5. When I first started dating my ex, when we were still getting to know each other, there was a moment when I saw her comfort a crying baby, and it made me way more attracted to her. I realized that for the first time I was finding myself attracted to someone for reasons beyond personality and physical attractiveness. I loved the fact that she was good with kids. She was the sort of woman I would want to raise a family with. Story 6. When I was around 27 years old, walking with my younger brother from the hospital back to the car, my mom and my older brother had asked us to head home and get some dinner, having been at the hospital waiting a good few hours for my dad to be discharged from the AE. It was following an aggressive seizure, one which came out of the blue, and at that point all but confirmed our worst fears, that his brain cancer, which had been successfully treated some 25 years earlier, had returned. What remained in my mind of my childhood was gone that evening, a happier and more optimistic time. Some 8 months after this, my dad passed away at home. At the time, walking back, what sealed it for me was what my brother said. This is growing up and it sucks. He wasn't wrong. I miss my childhood a great deal. Story 7. The day I realized that my hairdresser was actually in my dateable age range. Previously, it had believed that anyone with a similar, semi-professional job was a grown adult that lived in an entirely different world from my immature student lifestyle. Nope, there are people younger than me with their own homes and careers. Oh, also when Jon Stewart referred to a model that he believed was really hot, I Googled her name and found out that she was born after me. Story 8. I got kicked out of home at 16, so I had to step up my game pretty quickly. I signed my first lease to rent a studio flat on my own, got electricity connected, paid my bills on time, did all the housework, except for ironing. I disliked that shoot. All at 16. Yay. It was pretty tough going to school and then working straight after that, then getting home to do homework and have dinner, but whatever. Story 9. When my parents came to visit me while I was studying abroad, went on a double date with them and my ex. We all got tipsy, and the next day we were hungover together at a museum. It was the first time I realized I like hanging out with my parents. 6 years later, however, I often feel like I'm pretending to be a grown-up at work. Story 10. When I had to spend my own money on crap that I didn't want but had to have, I was totally cool with buying things like food or drinks, going out, and even paying rent. However, purchasing things like paper towels, TP, glass cleaner, dish soap, etc. are no fun at all and only serve to deplete my funds. Only adults will voluntarily pay for that sort of stuff. Story 11. Nobody's an adult. It's a giant goddamn game of chicken. Under the logic that, by law of averages, I am not unique, I'm pretty certain that almost everyone has the same thought patterns as me most of the time. So when we're sitting in a boardroom, I'm 49 certain I'm not alone in imagining bikini chicks in monster trucks firing flare guns at dinosaurs with jetpacks. Still, I'm not sufficiently convinced that they are as childish as I am, and they're just waiting for me to slip up. Someone has to go first, but nobody wants to take that risk that they're wrong. Even in the rare event they do, most people around them are so taken back, they don't want to take the risk this was just a fluke. That all said, I think the first time I felt like an adult, couldn't give a specific age or time, is when I realized that I actually had the means and ability to move from fantasy to reality. Disregarding fiscal practicality or safety, if I wanted to have a sword fight with friends, I don't need sticks or cardboard tubes. I can just go buy goddamn swords. If I wanted to put a trampoline in my living room, the only person who I need to get permission from is myself. Uninterrupted. Side theory I've been working on. As children, we come into the world seeing adults as a permanent fixture. They've been adults the whole time we were children. As far as we know, it's impossible for a child to become an adult because we've never really experienced that transition. We try to emulate what we think it means to be an adult, but that's it. We will never be adults the same way we saw adults when we were children, because as far as we can perceive things, it's impossible for a child to become an adult, only a more responsible child. Story 12. When I was young, I looked up to my older brother. He taught me about computers. He liked fixing their hardware and upgrading them. I liked the games and figuring out how software worked. He was pretty smart, and at about 7 years older than me, he pretty much knew everything in my eyes. I looked just like him at my age. In pictures of us as kids, my parents still have trouble figuring out which ones are of me and which are of him. He died when I was in 6th grade. I remember going in early thinking that I could get through the day without anyone knowing. But as soon as I walked into the classroom, I could see in my teacher's eyes that she already knew. She and I were the only ones there, and I started crying, and she held me for a minute until another student came in, and I sort of indicated I would rather not have this awkward moment, and I could handle it. Got through classes, saw the counselor. They announced it because I guess I didn't tell them not to. I remember only one thing in the counselor's room. I remember saying, I just don't want anyone to tell me they know how I feel, because they don't. My teacher offered to become my mentor in a program that, looking back, I'm fairly sure didn't actually exist. My mom developed a strange psychological connection to the way I looked and my brother being dead. She started having trouble talking to me pretty soon after he died. Eventually, it got to the point where it seemed she couldn't even look at me. I wasn't my brother. I was a poor replacement. I found out sometime around then that my mother had a miscarriage about a year before I was born and considered not having another child. I felt like a failed replacement for not only a miscarriage, but an older brother I would never live up to. I realized there was no one to teach me about computers anymore. So the next year, I joined a club in school to learn to make games and morph images into other images and all sorts of weird things that you could do. I had to take up the torch at home and fix all of the computers. We had a lot. My mom runs an office out of an extension to the house and holds on to things, so we had at least 6 or 7 computers in the house being used, and figure out what we needed to get to upgrade them. I did this all to be better than I was, to maybe someday be worth being looked at again by my own mother. After high school, I wanted to be a programmer. I wanted to go to college for game development. I went into a 2-year accelerated bachelor's degree program so I could get into the industry faster. I guess I wanted to prove to everyone, especially my mom, that I could do it. I graduated. It wasn't until I had returned home and started to look for a job that I realized my mom had gotten better. My time away had given her time to heal. My face and hair and clothes looked different, which helped. She seemed to accept what I wanted to do with my life and that I was a different person than my brother. It took me 6 months to find my first job, but I haven't had any trouble in the industry since then. I've been moving up and onward for just over 3 years now. My mom and I are on good terms. We've never really talked about those 6 or 7 years. I don't think we ever will. At some point in this story, I realized I had to be a man. I felt nothing but shame coming home and eating dinner with them after school, so I started eating at other people's houses. I worked and bought my own clothes because my dad wasn't around much, and I couldn't go shopping with my mom. I couldn't ask her for help paying for college. I couldn't talk to her about my problems. At some point, I became a man because I had no one to rely on but myself. I visited my old teacher since college. She's married and has a kid or two now. She's probably a great mom. I wish I had taken her up more on the mentoring thing instead of just going in for a day or two every month to talk to her. It would have been nice having someone be a little motherly back then. I don't really talk about this much. Story 13. When I first started this job about 1.5 years ago, my first real big boy job out of college. First day, HR paperwork. The adult thing didn't hit me until I filled out insurance paperwork. Fudge. And last week, I opened up an IRA to help with my taxes. I'm really too young to be feeling this old. Story 14. Might seem weird, but the first time I felt like an adult is when my father had his first stroke when I was 14. My mother refused to take care of him at the time, and my older brother never came around to help, so it was all dumped on me. I had to mature real fast. On a lighter note, the other time I realized I was an adult is when I paid my first student loan bill. Story 15. My father is an avid outdoorsman and made all of my siblings real nice walking sticks for our birthdays. Well, he carves the year that we get the sticks onto the shaft. Mine happened to be 2001. Well, we are hiking along and we find a group of Girl Scouts walking the trail. Well, they see our walking sticks and are instantly amazed by them. One of the girls then said, "Hey, that stick is older than I am. I have never felt so old in my entire life." Story 16. All the time I stop and think to myself, wait, who do I go to tell me what to do? I always get confused when I realize that it's me and that I can do adult things now. Still have sleepovers and build blanket forts though, so I don't know if I can really think of myself as an adult. 23 yo. Story 17. It took about 2 days. I got out of my internship one day and I did laundry the whole day instead of going to a party. When I got home from work, I untied my boots, cracked open a beer, and sat back for a minute and realized I'm exactly like my dad. The next morning, I cooked for the first time by myself. Bacon, egg, cheese on toast. It may have been a little bit burnt, but it was so good because I made it. Story 18. I'm turning 25 this summer, and I make more than the national average salary. I drive a brand new car. I am routinely trusted to make decisions at work that have vast cost implications if I make the wrong decision. I design things that will have to last for 40 or 50 years. I never get carded at the liquor store. I have a retirement fund. And let's see. I went to see the Muppets movie on opening weekend. I watch cartoons. I dislike dressing up nice, or even dressing up to go to work. And I pretty much only buy non-iron dress shirts because although I have an iron, I'm too fudge lazy to use it. I spent Sunday morning at the flea market looking for SNES games. Not an adult. Story 19. The day I realized, get to pick my friends. I don't need to put on a happy face and pretend to like everyone I was friends with in high school. I can actually choose who I want to spend time and hang out with, because they're my friends. God, when I realized that, it was like a bomb went off in my head. I can actually be with the people I want to be with since it's my life and my feelings. Awesome realization. Story 20. When I told my mother her husband had leukemia, my father woke me up at 9 asking me to accompany him to the hospital, who wanted to do tests on his blood again. So after a grueling amount of hours, I was the first in the family to find out he had cancer. He told me to get my mother and bring her to him. I've lived on my own at 19, bought my own car, pay my own bills, and do pretty much everything on my own. But I've never felt more of an adult while trying to calm my mother down, hugging her while she collapsed onto her knees, crying and pleading to God this wasn't happening. There's way more to this story, but it's too long to post on a cell phone. Story 21. When I went clothes shopping with my mom a few weeks ago, I'm 18. Normally, when with my mom parents, I feel like a child and worry what people will think. LOL, he's shopping with his mom, etc. But this time I was walking next to her and thought, fudge it, I'm an adult now. I can go shopping with whoever the hell I want. Right then, bam, adult. Feels good now, Miley. Story 22. A number of times. 1. When I graduated, moved out and got a job to fully support me. I figured, yeah, I'm an adult now. I take care of myself. 2. When I got a house, I take care of myself and have a mortgage. I'm an adult now. 3. When I got married, I'm an adult because I am in a great relationship with my wife. But all of these milestones seem trivial to having a kid. 4. I have a baby. I am legally and morally responsible to raise this little girl to the very best of my ability. I have to stay alive. She needs me. I have to have a good job. She needs money and security. I have to be respectable and upstanding, as I am her future template for relationships. I have to plan for retirement so that I don't depend on her in my old age. Holy fudge, I'm an adult. Edit. Formatting. Story 23. My girlfriend has a serious mental illness. Her meds stopped working and I was afraid I'd lose her to insanity. Because she doesn't want people knowing about it, I had no one to talk to. So I started doing research and the outcome didn't look good. Then I realized that being adult means that there sometimes isn't someone there to tell you it will all be okay. Because sometimes it won't be. Story 24. I love going to local band concerts from 6th grade onward. Something about them just made me love it. Every year Warped Tour was like Christmas in July. The last time I went was only for Streetlight Manifesto. I looked through the lineup and felt for the first time that I had lost touch with what the kids are listening to. Kinda lame, but that was one of my first, holy shoot, I'm growing up moments. Story 25. When I went to Japan last summer, I had 3 weeks booked off from work to go to America, but it was too expensive. My boyfriend had been bugging me about Japan for months, but I was a little scared. So 2 days before we flew out, we booked tickets and got a hotel. We flew out 2 days later. Just going away on holiday without any supervision, I could go and do anything I wanted while I was there. Of course, my mom freaked out over it because of the earthquake a few months earlier. The annoying part about this is she did geography at college and knows Tokyo is one of the safest cities in the world to be in during an earthquake. My first night there, I was woken up by a 6.1 earthquake. It was amazing, although someone was screaming their head off outside. I also feel like an adult at work. Quite a few people there are my age or older and still live with their parents. They constantly complain they have no money and can't wait for payday. I have to pay for bills, rent, food, and anything else I want myself. Most of them only pay $100 a month for rent, and that includes food. I still have money to spend at the end of each month, and I don't even notice pay going into my bank account. We all work about the same amount and get the same money, so I don't understand it. Story 26. For me, it was around when I was 19. At that time, I had moved out of my mom's house into an apartment with my girlfriend, now wife. I also started going to college and working at my first serious job. That was also around the time when I found out that my girlfriend was pregnant. Just a few months earlier, I was partying and doing whatever I wanted, and suddenly I had so many new responsibilities to deal with. Story 27. I'm 22. But I first felt like an adult during my college application process 4 years ago. I had to take the initiative to get everything in order on my own, driving over to campus to speak with admission and financial aid counselors with little help from my parents. Now I'm graduating in a couple weeks, and though I'm thankful for the help I have received from my parents, I feel like I made it through basically on my own, and my sense of self-worth is incredible. Story 28. Last week, got my first real paycheck. Beautiful outside. Just went to my first client site by myself. Big steps for me. I felt like such a badass for the first time in a long time. I'm a 20-year-old network support technician. I was 139 out of 140 kids in high school. Didn't do any work because I was cool like that. I was fudge stupid. And now I'm making great money for myself, live with my girlfriend and our 2 dogs, and have my own car. All the while, all the meanie and assholes from high school are still in college or working minimum wage lives. Story 29. When I heard my boss talking and suddenly realized she was trying to sound smart, that's when I knew I leveled up to adult. It's like I was instantly aware that I could call her out on her bullshit because I knew just as much more than she did. Story 30. I'm 23 and I still don't really feel like an adult, but I remember the exact moment that I realized I was supposed to be an adult and life started to scare the shoot out of me. I graduated high school and started college at the age of 17. Several months in, I realized I was becoming really depressed and was incredibly unhappy with my choice of school. A story for another time. It really was a shoot decision made hastily at the relentless hounding of a shoot guidance counselor. I went to my parents and had a really long talk with them, during which I cried profusely and decided to quit school and just work for a while till I figure my shoot out. I had to do the whole withdrawal process on my own. all the while being berated by everyone I had to deal with along the way that worked there. Somehow, I suddenly had the power to change my whole life with a couple signatures, without my parents there vouching for me. It scared the absolute shoot out of me. The idea that within a couple weeks I'd have to start making 2 student loan payments and had no job also horrified me. I was really ill-prepared for real life. Up until that point, I'd only ever been a student and a child. I didn't have a driver's license, nor did I know how to drive, a job, a bank account, or the knowledge of how to even write a check. Adulthood and real responsibility was suddenly thrust upon me, and I just had to deal with it. Luckily, I do have 2 awesome parents who helped me adjust as best they could. Life is just fudge scary, man. Story 31. When I found out that most recent ex that I dated for 4 years was sleeping with my roommate and used to be friend I'd known since elementary school, the moment I went from suspecting to sure and had the realization that I didn't care because neither of them mattered to me at that point was when I crossed over to the adult side of life. Story 32. I'm 21 and started to live alone. I got to say, when I started paying bills, laundry and ironing my own shirts, cleaning the house, etc., that I never did when I lived with my parents, I realized I was an adult. However, the first time I ever felt like an adult was when I didn't get ID'd at the liquor store. Story 33. When I was filling out my 100th FAFSA for grad school and was able to check no to, would you like to include information regarding your parents? Finally, they offered loans based on my income. Also, when I realized there was no one else to do the dishes at my apartment except me, sad moment. Story 34. I guess when I started talking to cousins and stuff, and I realized that I saw them as adults doing adult things, like having kids, moving out, etc., etc., but they were a decade younger than me. That's about when I thought, oh shoot, I'm not a kid anymore. Even though I still felt pretty much like a 20-yo clown. 2 realizations closely followed. 1, I'm really just faking being a responsible, clued-in adult. 2, so is pretty much everyone else. I gained a lot of sympathy from my parents, who I always saw as adults that should be above reproach, making mistakes. It's harder for me to be a judgmental prick when I realize just how directionless I would be had I been in their shoes during some of the things they went through. Story 35. I am 25 and could pass as 18. I was just recently quizzed by a guy at a convenience store as I bought a cigar. I didn't feel like an adult until a few things happened. 1, I make more than my parents and am in a position of power at work second only to the owner-president. 2, and most importantly, I actually spent quite a few hours researching which razor blades to buy for my straight razor. Sure, you can start shaving at 16, but who researches razor blades for more than 10 seconds at a store? A bored adult who dislikes irritation, that's who. It still feels like I'm skating on the cusp of adultlandia. Story 36. I'm 23, but when I was 22, I got a mortgage and I got married 4 months ago. A month ago, I got a grill as a gift from my parents, so I've been throwing steaks on the grill every night. I am grown up, but I don't feel grown up. I like it, but don't like it at the same time. Story 37. 20, turning 21 tomorrow, and I sort of feel it, unlike people here. I guess maturity-wise, I passed over the need to go clubbing partying hard, and I kind of just want my life to begin. I'm tired of being in a group still referred to as kids. I'm tired of being a college student with a part-time job. I just want to be an independent adult. So basically, I don't know if I'm an adult, but I'm stuck in that place where I'm not a kid anymore, and I want to be one. Story 38. Being a man is all about doing things that you don't want to do. The day I started feeling like an adult was when I started doing things that I didn't want to do, not because I'd get in trouble from my parents or boss if I didn't, but because they needed to be done. To put it another way, when I started to make my own decisions and didn't automatically pick what would be easiest for me at the time, or what an authority figure would approve of. Story 39. I'm 26. I've been living on my own since I was 18. I pay taxes. I've had long-term relationships. I've traveled, gone to school, done substances, been in car accidents, experienced the passing of a loved one. I even have a job in my specified engineering field. However, I don't feel like an adult yet. I'm not sure I really will until I have kids or something. Story 40. After I got a DWI when I was 19, yeah, I know, incredibly stupid and irresponsible. For what it's worth, I paid a hell of a debt to society for it. I called my dad from jail and told him what happened. He told me, and I quote, "Well, I bet you feel stupid now. Any idea when they're going to let you out?" I told him, I have to pay $400 to make bail. He replied, again direct quote, well that kinda sucks. I hope you get everything figured out. Click. I sat in county jail for 12 days until one of my buddies realized I wasn't around and tried to file a missing person report. The police told him what happened and he posted bail for me. In case you're stupid like me, keep in mind if you're ever in Austin TX, all the Travis County bondsmen require a third-party cosigner, so no bailing your own dumb ass out. Story 41. Starting to pay bills was one, but I was only 20 when that started to happen. Maybe it was when one of my best friends was diagnosed with a brain disorder, and I had to watch her go through bad days before her surgery and realize that we were all each other had at the time. That at 23, our parents can't just come to the rescue anymore, and that it was my responsibility to be there for my friend, and to be a good friend at that. It also started to hit me when people started dying. I'm not in the little bubble of ignorance and bliss I once was. People are going to stop being here, and that kind of hit me hard last year. Story 42. I stopped playing video games at 10 p.m. one day and set my alarm and went to sleep. I had work the next day, and I didn't realize how weird that felt till I woke up. Another thing that was weird was hearing Guinness and thinking beer rather than Book of World Records. Story 43. When I first got a key lanyard. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I remember being in middle school and high school and seeing these older students coming back to visit their old teachers, and they would always have a lanyard with a bunch of keys on them, and it would jangle importantly as they left, off in a hurry to do something important. I finally got a lanyard with a bunch of keys on it my first year of college. Me gusta. Story 44. When I was, 9 or 10 years old, my mother was comatose on the couch. A combination of copious green stuff, Valium, periodic speed use, and schizophrenia made her unreliable, and I had to find a way to feed my then 1.5-year-old sister or wait the 6 or 7 hours until her father, not mine, got home. Took me until I was 16 or so before I learned to have a good time. Even now, here in my mid-20s, with my mother deceased and all responsibility for others lifted off my shoulders, I still automatically attempt to assume responsibility for things around me. It's a process. Just a note, people, if you're a junkie, probably shouldn't raise kids. Even if it ends well, it's going to be in spite of you rather than because of you. Story 45. It was when I was 22. I was coming home on leave to see my parents after being in the military for 2 years. When I got there, my mom had shots of vodka waiting on the table for us. I don't know why, but it's the first time I felt like an equal in her eyes. This is when I realized I was an adult. Story 46. I had a minor lawsuit with Miley Cyrus's clothing line last year over some stolen artwork that ended up on a t-shirt. Generally, my dad gives me advice and points me in the right direction when it comes to big things like this. But this time, I hired the lawyer and took all the steps necessary to get my settlement money all on my own. I felt like a real fudge businesswoman after that. Story 47. When my mom died, there had been moments prior, owning my first car, getting a real job, renting my apartment. But when I was sitting in a diner with some family members discussing what we were going to do for my mother's funeral, I had this sort of realization that I am on my own. Story 48. I didn't really feel like an adult until January of this year. I'm 25, and in January I moved into my first apartment that I didn't have to share with someone. I didn't get that slap upside my head feeling of, OMG, I'm an adult, when I signed my lease or when I moved all my stuff in. No, I didn't feel that until I was unpacking my dishes. A few weeks earlier at Christmas, my parents had gotten me a lot of the kitchen goods I still needed, including a set of very nice, classy-looking baking dishes. Dishes that I will probably have for a very long time, provided that I don't drop and break them, and will not be embarrassed to use if I'm hosting a nice meal. It was in that moment, as I was washing them so I could put them away, that it hit me. Holy shoot, I really am an adult now. Story 49. I haven't yet. I'm 19 and I drink, play video games, offer cookies to people passing by. This doesn't really go that well. And darn it, I've been so worried growing up. It's such a relief reading about these 20-somethings still acting like I do. Too many of my friends are having kids or getting engaged. Terrifies me. Jesus, thank you all for calming me down. Story 50. I just turned 23. I've been out of undergrad, working at a bankruptcy law firm, for about 2 years now. In a few months, I'll be heading off to law school. I live on my own and pay my way. None of these things make me feel like an adult, merely that I'm capable of being one when necessary. A few days ago, though, I was having some fairly routine medical exams and was told that they would like to get an MRI. When I asked why, They replied that there was concern of a brain tumor. That, right there, made me feel like an adult. The feeling of invincibility that dominated my childhood disappeared in an instant. Story 51. I don't feel like an adult most of the time. Sometimes I get the feeling that I am an adult, but that quickly passes after whatever put it in my head is overdone with. I'm basically the same person I have been since childhood. Experiences have just made me think new and different, more intelligent thoughts. Story 52. At a family function a couple of weeks ago, and some of the boys were playing their 3DS while eating dinner. The first thought I had in my head, and I almost said this to them, was, put the video games away and eat. I stopped and just thought, wow, I've become that person, and let them play away. Hell, I used to be the person playing Game Boy at the table when I could get away with it. Being an adult sucks. Story 53. Several years after I moved out, it just hit me all of a sudden one day that I didn't have to live like my parents, value the same things, or have the same expectations for life. I realized this in an intellectual sense, but subconsciously I was still trying to measure myself up to them. It still surprises me sometimes when I'll mention to my husband that I want to do something my family would never consider, and he's all, so why are you doing it? So I guess I'm still getting over it, PP. Story 54. I'm 20 years old and started working as a waiter a few weeks ago, and whenever someone calls me, sir. We also serve a lot of families, so I get a lot of parents telling their kids, let the nice man get you a N. Edit. Oops, left out a few deets. Story 55. My first girlfriend out of high school. I was 18, she was 22 with a 2-year-old son. That made me feel a bit older, but he got really sick one winter, and we had to drive him to the emergency room. It was when the nurse handed my girlfriend the clipboard and said, you and your husband can go and fill these out. It will only be about 5 minutes until the doctor is ready to see him. After her and I broke up, I reverted back to more childish ways until I was ready to take another crack at being more adult-like again. Maybe around 22 or 23, I started acting more age-appropriate. But even in between then, I would catch myself acting like a father to kids that weren't even mine. Cousin I've seen twice in my life at a family get-together. Slow down, you shouldn't be running around the pool. Or being the Buzz Eliminate cousin that doesn't let kids get away with shoot. I don't know. Did you ask your mom if you could have a cookie? It's almost time to eat anyhow. Do you want to ruin your appetite? As I realize I am eating a cookie of my own right in front of the kid. Story 56. Turned 25 last week. Don't feel any older than 20. I am starting to realize that I should actually go see a doctor someday, cause the eye doctor and the dentist both went, Jesus man, how have you been walking around like this, when I saw them last summer. Story 57. When I went to the hospital for an asthma attack at 3 a.m., and realized that I didn't have to tell my parents or anybody. They both found out, but it was liberating to realize that I knew how and could take care of myself even in an emergency situation. Story 58. When my baby went into a febrile seizure at 6 months old and spent 2 weeks in the ICU, I had to make all these decisions about her care and treatment. It was then that I realized I was responsible for another human life. In turn, made me realize that I was truly an adult. Story 59. Usually, I can't tell that I'm going to be 37 this year because I stopped remember things somewhere around age 23. Sometimes I even forget and think I'm, still 25 or something. I notice that I'm an adult the most when I've been bent over a Jeep all day putting in floor pans, and by the end of the shift, my back is fudge. I used to be able to do that stuff upside down with a hangover. Story 60. I was in the candy bar aisle of my local corner store, and the realization hit me that I could buy any candy bar I wanted. I could buy one of all 275 kinds, or buy them out of Snickers entirely, or get 19 of them and go home and eat them all right at once. Kids can't do that, but I sure can. Story 61. When I was 19, going back to college after winter break, I had for the first time ever gotten to the airport by myself, with no send-off, arrived 6 hours later in CA by myself, and took another can to campus. The exact moment was when I was going down the escalator toward baggage claim. I realized I could do things independently. Story 62. I flirted with it a bit when I got my first place without roommates, but the day it really hit me was when I had my family over my place for Thanksgiving dinner that my fiancé and I cooked. Also, that was the day I was freed from the tyranny of my aunt's fennel-laced stuffing. I dislike fennel in my stuffing. Story 63. When I said describing my bills, $100 bills flying out the window, it was then I realized I sounded just like my parents. That being said, I have a 401k to manage, a home to clean, and a career to keep up with. It's great, but realizing many of my peers think a 401k must be an iPhone app, I make a Jackie Chan face inside my head. Story 64. I used to live in a flat that was in a block made up of mostly housing association flats. One summer evening, I heard banging from outside my kitchen window, so I had a glance out and saw two kids kicking in the reinforced glass door for the car part. So I opened the window and in my best grown-up voice shouted a short, sharp, "Oi!" They looked up at me, froze for a second, and then ran off. It was that day, age 24, that I became a man. Story 65. I learned how to be good with money, polite to others, and manage my time quite well before becoming an adult. For me, that time is coming soon, though. My first paycheck and complete independence from my parents will signal my adulthood for me. This is in spite of the fact that I will likely spend some of that money on comics and Legos. Story 66. When I took my wife to Vegas for our second or third anniversary, I won $500 the first hour I was there and bought her some expensive jerk shoes. 3 days later, I lost all my winnings, $700 more. Then I came home to find out the gas was turned off, over $40 measly. Story 67. At age 22, I had a dream in which I was tooling around some magically awesome racetrack in a totally boss Ferrari. And after finishing a sweet lap involving lots of power sliding, I sat in my dream supercar and thought, this car is so much fun, but it really wasn't a prudent investment. Story 68. For me, it was the first time I went in to a department store and upon browsing through the juniors department, realized I would look ridiculous in almost everything there. Also, buying groceries while tallying up the total in my head so I wouldn't get my debit card declined if I went over the amount I knew was in the bank should be in the bank. Story 69. The first time I had to buy my own toilet paper. When you realize that you got up in the morning, dragged your jerk to work every day so you can spend most of your time doing stuff you don't want to do so that you can get done, and then go spend the money you earned on paper to wipe your jerk with. That's when you know you're an adult. Story 70. My mom was a pretty intense alcoholic. There are two events in particular when I realized that I was the adult in the relationship. The first was when she had gotten into some trouble and felt that she was being judged by the family, which she was. She just had this outpour of emotion in front of me and then ran into my arms and just cried, saying, "Please help me. I just don't know what to do." I remember suddenly realizing that she was actually shorter than me and how thin and small she felt in my arms. The second was long after she died. I was 16 when she died. Actually, pretty recently. I remembered stuff from when I was little, like her telling me to hold back her hair while she threw up blood into a toilet on multiple occasions, starting to babysit myself for 5 hours plus when I was 4, and living in my mom's car for a month at a time because she blew the rent money on cocaine or her BF kicked her out. I just realized that not a lot of other kids had to deal with that kind of stuff. Story 71. When I sent a salad back for my girlfriend because it had cheese on it and she is allergic to milk, she was like, "No, don't worry, it's okay." And I was like, "Excuse me, sir. I'm sorry to ask this of you, but she is allergic to milk. Is there any way you could take this back and bring a salad without any cheese?" Was bad jerk. Story 72. I don't feel like I've had too many moments when it's hit me in the face all of a sudden, but it's been more of a gradual realization. After I got my first job, age 22, a few months after graduation, and I realized that simple things that I love became a chore, cooking, because I'm so busy with work. Also, it becomes clear when I realize that going to bed at 9 p.m. would be a dream come true. Sleeping in means waking up at 8 or 9 instead of noon because my body clock is so adjusted to my sleep schedule for work. It's also surreal when my friends who are younger than me complain about college assignments, and I am sitting here wishing I could go back to living my life where a period of 13 weeks or a semester are where all of my real responsibilities lie. Oh, to go back to having the privilege of being in college. Story 73. 21, and I still feel like a kid. I've rented my own apartment, more like a house, for the last 2 years of college, paid my own bills, and financed my own education without any debt. But I've never had that feeling. All it meant to me was I get to stay up all night, play really loud music on my speakers, and eat ice cream for breakfast, and let things get really messy and icky, and choose my outfit from the clothes on the floor. This thread depresses me. I hope to God I never get that feeling. Story 74. First felt like an adult at the rodeo bar watching my friends getting thrown by that mechanical titan, until it was finally my turn. I climbed on and lasted all of 3 seconds, landed on something soft, to a crowd of cheers, to brace me and themselves and all of us against the deaths of our would-be dreams. Story 75. I'm only 18 and I feel like a kid most of the time, but the first time I used my card, using my hard-earned money to pay for some of the leftover dues that financial aid didn't cover. Cheers to the next decade or so of my life doing just this, and then a few more to pay off loans. Woo-hoo. Story 76. When I moved away from home to live with my girlfriend while she finished school, I made the decision and followed through on my own, without help from anyone. It was very liberating, actually. That was 5 years ago, and I don't think family or friends expected this independence to last so long. Feels good. Story 77. I have repeated moments where it hits me like some new revelation. I was at a business conference yesterday in the restroom when I thought to myself, oh man, what if one of the business guys comes and talks to me? Followed immediately by, wait, that's why I'm here. Because I'm supposed to meet with these people. The very first time was probably when I held my daughter and went, this thing depends on me now. Guess I better get my act together. Story 78. Well, apparently at 3 years of age, I asked my dad, why am I so small when I'm an adult? So I guess that was it. I don't think it's really happened since. Not that I act like a child all the time, but when I act like a grown-up, it feels like I'm pretending. I hope it's the same for everyone. Story 79. I'll never forget it. My wife and I were at a bar, and the bartender offered us a free Coors Light that he poured in error. We turned it down because we were enjoying good beer. We turned down free beer. We looked at each other like we knew we had just become adults. Story 80. I pretty much moved straight from living with my parents to living with my wife. At 21, my parents and siblings moved out of state, and I got a divorce. I moved into my own first apartment, paying my own bills for the first time, completely coupled with my first feelings of homesickness, all during a divorce. Growing up is fun. Story 81. All of you guys who are older and don't feel like an adult yet, I envy you. I've had to learn to be responsible for all of my own actions at the ripe age of, 16. I lived with my mom and she was never there for me since I was about 10. Stepfather issues. But I had other people taking care of me until I was 13, which I am thankful for. I basically roamed on my own, and if I were to get into trouble, my mother made it very clear she wasn't going to help me if I fudge up. Although I was responsible for myself at 16, where I held a job and had to start paying for everything, I didn't feel like an adult until recently, 21, when I got my own place, learned how to cook, actual good meals, bottle feeding, taking care of a kitten. It's like a baby but less time effort. Tending to a garden, yay, fresh veggies, and having only a semester left until I graduate with my BA. Oh, and what made me completely feel like an adult was when my mother started coming over to eat and expects me to feed her at least once a week. This is a woman who rarely had a hot plate of dinner for me when I was younger. Honestly, I don't mind cooking for her, and I do enjoy it. Even with all of the times she wasn't there for me, I forgive her because she made me way stronger than I would have been if I had to lean on someone for support. Story 82. I felt like an adult the first time I won a civilized debate about politics with my parents and grandparent. I was 16 and had just converted them to the wonders of universal health care. Something about being able to convince others to believe what I'm saying made me feel strong. Note, was not actually adult, just felt like one.